Hello, we're looking at another law of what's called deductive reasoning, which is called the law of syllogism. And in this box here, before we even do problem number 2, the law of syllogism, the main idea behind that is this right here. It says if P then Q, if that's true, and then your second statement starts where the other one left off at the conclusion, if Q then P. So notice the conclusion of this one becomes the hypothesis of the next statement. Then you can link the first hypothesis and the last conclusion together, which leads to that. I like to think of it as the transitive property that says, if 3 equals x and x equals 2 plus 1, then 3 equals 2 plus 1. It's kind of a if A then B and B then C, then A then C. Kind of concept. Here's a couple of examples. If it is July, then you are on summer vacation. And if you are on summer vacation, then you work at a smoothie shop. So since the conclusion of the first one started up with the hypothesis of the second one, then we can link the first and the last one together and say, well, if it is July, then you work at a smoothie shop. Now that may or may not be true, but it does follow the right deductive reasoning called the law of syllogism. Okay? Now, let's move down to the actual problem itself here and look at a couple of these. Problem number 2 says, what can we conclude about the following information? If a figure is a square, then the figure is a rectangle. And then the second statement says if a figure is a rectangle, then the figure has 4 sides. So again, because the conclusion, this one, of the first one, matches the hypothesis of the second one, then we can combine the first hypothesis and the last conclusion together, because that's what the law of syllogism does, and we come up with a statement that says, if a figure is a square, then the figure has 4 sides. And that's kind of the concept behind law of syllogism. Now, let's look at example B. If you do gymnastics, then you are flexible. If you do ballet, then you are flexible. Now, the problem here, and they've kind of color-coded it, you are flexible is kind of the conclusion for both of them. So it's not the conclusion of one picks up with the hypothesis of the second one. So because of that, this statement, they have the same conclusion, and neither conclusion is the hypothesis of the other statement. So we can't use the law of syllogism on this, and we cannot make a conclusion because of that. All right. So let's look at a couple of got it's here. Letter A, if a whole number ends in 0, then it's divided by 10. Okay. That is your hypothesis conclusion. Notice if a whole number is divisible by 10, which picks up from the conclusion of the original one, then it's divisible by 5. So our statement would say, if a whole number ends in 0, then it is divisible by 5. Okay? And all I did was link the original hypothesis with the last conclusion, because you can do that using what's called the law of syllogism. Okay? The second one, if angle A, if ray AB and AD are opposite rays, then the two rays form a straight angle. If two rays are opposite rays, then the two rays form a straight angle. Now, because both of these, the conclusion of one was not the hypothesis of the other, then we can't use, again, what's called the law of syllogism. So this one, we can't make a logical statement out of that, or a logical deduction, as they call it, out of this particular one. because the conclusion doesn't match the hypothesis of the second one. And that's just one of the two that we've looked at in this chapter on logical deduction or logical thinking. Okay. Hope this was helpful.